talk about our session, elementary course design. I'm so glad to see everyone here, and I saw the plea last spring for some elementary sessions for QUp, and I knew that my school had the people, and I just go find those people. So I'm so thankful that Sara joined me today and is going to share some of her course design and how we worked together to apply the QM rubric to the courses in our school. All right, the QR code is the same on all three slides, so you don't have to rescan that. And it's just a fun play on the Sherlock Holmes theme that we had in our title. I am Betsy Springer. I'm an instructional coach at the Go Lake Virtual Partnership in Southwest Michigan. I am also an ELA teacher. So my background is in teaching ELA grades 6 through 12. I've been teaching online for 11 years. I was the first in-house teacher that our district hired 11 years ago, and I taught in the classroom about 10 years before that. I have a master's in instructional tech, and I'm working on a doctorate in education policy. I'll turn it over to Sara.
And I am Sara Manring. I have had a variety of teaching opportunities. I started out teaching 6th grade for a number of years. I then homeschooled my boys for their kindergarten through 12th grade. And most recently, this is my 4th year teaching virtually at Go Lake Partnership as an elementary teacher. So our school, Go Lake Virtual Partnership, as Betsy said, we are in Southwest Michigan. We're part of the Go Lake School District. We have almost 1,300 students in our program, and these students are both full-time and part-time. They range from kindergarten to early college, so we've got a good variety. And we hire our own teachers and staff. We've got about 30 certified teachers, and within this group, we have over 100 courses that teachers have written. So as Betsy said, for this presentation, we're going to be sharing how we used the QM rubric for evaluation of my 3rd through 5th grade elective course that I wrote.
All right, so how we came to be using the QM rubric. As just kind of the old soul on the staff, I was the first virtual teacher that was hired 11 years ago. And then after I was there about 3 years, we got a principal, and our program has grown every year. And I was always onboarding the new staff and helping them and doing staff support. And it got to the point where that was taking up enough time. We have about 30 certified staff, I think Sara said, that I approached the principal and I said, I think this is part of my job now. I'm not just the English teacher that kind of helps orient new staff. So beginning of last school year, they said my new title was instructional coach. And so I was super excited. And then I went home and I Googled, what does an instructional coach do? And I read up on it. And then I thought, how do I do that virtually? And this is what we came up with. I said, I think that the QM stuff that I was already working on, so I had already done the using the K12 rubric course. Then I became instructional coach. And I said, I think that would fit into the instructional coach's role to help teachers to get our courses that we write to that standard. And it would be a really great objective tool for me to use to give teachers feedback. So it's not just that your course doesn't look like I like it to look, but this is, really something above just my opinion. And so I took the QM Reviewer Level 1 course so that I could just feel really confident that I was doing that process really well and using that rubric. We do write a lot of our own content, and most of that content is at the elementary level. Sara mentioned that we have over 100 courses that our teachers write, and that was born out of need 11, 12 years ago. We couldn't find a lot of art, music, and PE courses specifically at the elementary level. And just it continues to be where we see the biggest shortfall in courses that are available from vendors is in elementary. You might have elementary art. Now you might have second grade art, but a lot of our students will take 2 art classes or 2 PE classes for several years in a row. And we just have always needed more content. And so our teachers have taken that on to write it. And we've always tried to make sure that it's really appropriate for the students that they're writing it for. We started out with just elementary PE, and now we have it split out by grade level. And we have a lot of other electives in a lot of other subject areas as well, some literature electives all the way down to kindergarten, science electives, and those things. And then they're really popular. The teachers get to interact with the students in a lot of cases, and the students want to take the course again. So then the next year we need a new version of that course because we can't offer the same course for credit more than once. So that is why we are in the position where we're writing a lot of elementary content, and we really want to balance it being appropriate and it being high quality. A lot of the policy pressure we get is just that it has to be 1,098 hours, and that is what a quality course is. And we know that's not appropriate for maybe for a 5-6-year-old little kiddo. So we need another objective framework that we can say, the course might not be as beefy as English 12, but we do know that it hits all the marks as far as covering the content and all of those things that are in the rubric. So I approached my administrator about using this QM review process with the teachers and dove right into it. I dove right into it in September. I hadn't taken the reviewer course yet, just to give you our whole little timeline of how we got to where we are today. And I just started coaching officially. And so I kind of married these 2 ideas together of a QM review and an instructional coaching cycle. So it really involves at least 3 meetings in a coaching cycle. I meet with the teacher. I took volunteers. Sara was an early volunteer, so she got to learn along with me. And I started with the teachers that would volunteer for the process. And I think that took me up through January. And then by that time, I said everybody knew this was coming. I'm trying to review a course for everybody by the end of the year. And then all went really well for the most part. So I would meet with them. I would identify goals that they have for their teaching, much like you would do with a classroom teacher, goals they have for their content, areas they particularly want me to pay attention to. And then asynchronously, they would work on the course, and then I would work on reviewing the course. And I would give them feedback on a spreadsheet. I took the rubric, I put it into a Google Sheet, and I share that back and forth with them. We'll show you an example of that here in a moment. But I would put the feedback on there and my suggestions, what I found, and then we would meet again to discuss, the feedback, whether what I was telling them made sense, whether I'd missed things. That definitely happened, especially in the beginning. And then they could either set more goals, we could start a new coaching cycle, or, they could be just take those things they'd learned as they continue to create more content.
So from my point of view, the course I designed was an elective for 3rd through 5th graders. It was mix, measure, make, cooking across the curriculum. I had never built a course from scratch before. So last year I just started building it with the things that I thought were important. And then it kind of coincided with Betsy's role becoming instructional coach and offering to come alongside with this rubric. So that was perfect. Since it was an elective, I initially felt less pressure in thinking about meeting standards. I was just like, okay, how am I going to build this course was my first thought. But once I kind of got into it, it helped to have Betsy come alongside and make sure my course was on track. So it was just really helpful to see my course through her eyes. She was able to identify things that I had missed. For example, I had not clearly stated how quickly I would reply to emails and how quickly I would grade. In my head, I knew that I would reply to emails within 24 hours, but parents and students didn't know that. So using the rubric helped to identify that. And then once I had a feel for how my course would look, it was just so helpful to make sure that, yes, the standards were being met. I found this spreadsheet that Betsy has up there as an example so helpful. It was nice to have a place with our dialogue alongside the standard. And Betsy, maybe you want to explain how you set it up?
Yeah, so the first 4 columns you see there are straight out of the QM rubric, and I just copied them, made them, cleaned them up a little bit. I thought it was really helpful for the teachers to see the exact verbiage of the standard that I was looking for. And then I put, just like if you did a QM review, the evidence that I found, and then the white column there, the one that's not blue, the teacher could leave me a response. So I might give them a description of the evidence, and then they would say, a goal they have for that area, or they might, if it was a suggestion for improvement that I had left, they could leave me, something in the next column saying that here's how they had changed it, or they had updated it, or questions they still had for me. That came up a lot. And then we just continued to work across the spreadsheet until it was completed to both people's satisfaction. I could link resources in there, like videos, and then it was also a nice repository. If I had another teacher that needed a similar resource, I could go back to the spreadsheet that I had shared with Sara and copy resources over to another teacher. Each teacher had their own spreadsheet. They were just shared between me and the teacher, but then I also did give the teacher an artifact they could use, say in a principal evaluation, as an artifact of some personal goal they have that they're working on for that year.
And just to piggyback, I really loved the column, the debrief reply, because that is where Betsy would put in her ideas, or just like she said, that repository. It was right there with the task that I needed to work on. So everything was just laid out, easy to find and easy to use.
All right, so that was our process as we went through it. And then the last thing I wanted to share was kind of our, where I went from there. So like I said, Sara was one of my brave early volunteers, and I learned a lot, and I did probably, 18 courses last year. And I didn't do 2 the same ever, because every time I did one, I'd learn how to be a little bit better at it. So I probably owe Sara maybe a new one, but I learned not to throw everything at them at once. So I found the whole rubric was too much, even though I had approached it as they're going to meet most of the standards, and I just want them to know how amazing they are, and that they have, the whole rubric looks a little scary, but you're doing most of it naturally just because, of the quality of staff we have. And I thought that would be really validating. It still was really overwhelming. So as I went, I would maybe send them the rubric and say, maybe identify a few things you think you do well and a few areas you want to grow, and we'll just do those. And I would, just delete the rest of the rows. I also had originally put the scores on there, and I eventually took those off because people are just a little too competitive at my organization. And no matter how many times I told them 80% is the goal, they weren't happy with 80. And so that just didn't land the way I thought it would either. So I took the scores off. They just didn't get to know what their scores were. I really found that this was a great help to our whole organization. As I discussed with our administrators, our goal was to have some objective measure to say that our courses were quality. We have not gotten to the level where we have submitted courses for official review. We are contemplating a template review just because our content changes year to year. That wouldn't be like the best place to put resources into, but we can do these in-house, and it's been super helpful just for us to say, that we have somebody that's a QM reviewer, that's me. I mean, and QM is not saying that they're certified, but we've used the rubric, and we feel like we're making the mark. We're doing just as good as any vendor course out there. And also, I just saw a ton more of the amazing stuff our teachers are doing. I think I work with the best teachers out there, but we just don't see each other's courses that much. I can't pop into Sarah's class generally and see how that it is going, just like you would in a traditional class. So I got to see it. I got to share that with the administrators. As a coach, I don't share teacher specific things with my administrator without the teacher's permission. So sometimes I would say to a teacher, I really want to share our spreadsheet. As my review as an instructional coach, I shared someone's spreadsheet with the principal as an artifact of my own professional development. But I would generally be able to say, I'm seeing some really amazing things out there. Or if I talk to the teacher and let's say, I want to share this to the administrator on your behalf, just so that she sees what we're doing, that I would put our courses up against anyone else's any day of the week, and that they are really high quality. And I just see my role as a coach is also to be a cheerleader and to let my staff and our community at large know about those things that are happening that are really worth celebrating.
To piggyback on that, I did really like how the Betsy spreadsheet did allow for those cheerleader moments where she could really encourage you with, yeah, you've got this, you're doing great. So I think one thing I learned from doing the rubric was that it just really built some confidence for me in wanting to potentially create another class, that yes, I can do this. And then knowing that the rubric is there also helps me to make sure that I am doing a good job in meeting the needs of all my learners. I also loved how the rubric encouraged me to try new things. I was kind of starting out with just the assessment being a quiz each week, and that's the easy route out, but using the rubric helped me and encouraged me to look outside the box, to find some other authentic methods of assessment in the virtual world. And so that was a good thing to push me over that. Again, the rubric just helped fill in gaps in my course. For example, I didn't do a good job of explaining at the beginning when lessons would be available. I knew in my head they'd be available on Tuesdays, but parents and students didn't know that. So again, just having somebody else look at the course helps fill in those gaps and see where maybe things are missing that you think are obvious and are not.
Another coaching strategy I developed through this process was we took a PD that was like a trade and share. So we had teachers log into their courses and then trade computers with another teacher. And, you got to walk through someone else's course, kind of in the way I do when I do one of these little mini in-house reviews. And teachers just learned so much from seeing other teachers work, and that is not easy to do in our environment. So these are some ways we found to kind of overcome that difference. As I reflected on our program as a whole and the QM rubric, and specifically the elementary annotations, I went through and I listed them. I think I have them all here. And what we have done to make sure we're covering those elementary items specifically. So for the first one there, just making sure that our communication is going to, we call them learning coaches. It's usually a parent, but we try to use the more inclusive language of just learning coach. Make sure they're included in the communication, that they can see, they know how to find it in the course, along with the student, that they're getting progress reports, that they're getting access to documents and all of that, that they're looped into all of that conversation that covers several of these standards. that we integrate supports and that our staff are all familiar with our integrated supports and how those work, that our school issues Chromebooks and they have text to speech and speech to text, that students can, our LMS will allow them to record audible responses, and just to make sure that we have the supports in there and that the students know how to use them. Usually it's 2 or 3 steps from having a tool to making sure people know how to find the tool and how to use it. Because I hear a lot of, especially at the elementary level, I'll get the, well, yeah, that's in the syllabus. The link to academic supports is in the syllabus. Well, a first grader has never heard the word syllabus before. And even parents, if they maybe didn't go to college, they don't even know that's where they should look either. So just making it really obvious where the information for help is. So we've really just beefed that up every year. We just try to do better with that. Using visual cues in our course design has been something that I think has addressed some of the elementary specific standards. I have an example of Sarah's course on the left where, a content will have a particular icon next to it. And then an assignment is that one with the pencil, that the bonus section is labeled, and then that we keep those visual cues consistent through the whole course. So students, even if they're not strong readers yet, they can navigate a little bit on their own. It really helps parents too, if they have more than one student. They, even if parents that are home with their kids all day, they don't have time to sit at their elbow all day and say, now click here. So we've tried to really beef up those supports. And then the last thing is the tool we use. We use a tool called Moat, and I know there are other tools out there, but this is something our elementary music teacher brought to us, that it's a plugin for Google Slides, and she adds her voice to captions. So if you click on this little purple bubble, you hear her read, how about this? And longer directions as well. You hear her read that out loud. And then if you click on this little purple one, you hear her doing the activity. So she'll, you click on it, it'll say click, this is Mrs. Alvey clapping the rhythm, and then she claps it audibly for the student to follow along with. So those are some kind of tools that we've used to make our content more user-friendly for the littlest kiddos. The biggest thing we did was spent a couple of years evaluating our LMS and choosing one that really would allow us to integrate all of these supports, because we previously were using an LMS that's really geared more towards higher ed, and it just didn't work. So all of those things have really helped us to address all of those things, all of those needs. Our contact information is here, and then we have time for questions, comments, other resources to share. There's a small enough group. Yeah, you could just go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me? My name's Kevin.
Yes.
Awesome. I'm visiting from Nevada. Couple questions. Number one, your coaching model sounds fascinating. I had a question for you, Betsy. Do you ever think about taking this model and applying it for educators in a live in-person setting? Because it's so kind and it's so user-friendly. Do you ever think of that?
I've joked often that myself and our staff, we need to write the book on teaching online, because so often we're retrofitting brick and mortar strategies and doing them online. Our district has coaches in every building, and I meet with them every 2 weeks, but it's just, we do things so different. We are the unicorn, and they seem so confused to have to include us in things. But that's really great feedback. I'll have to think on it. Now that I have a year under my belt, it doesn't sound as scary as maybe it would have last year.
Yeah, and it's the process. I'm not talking about the details. I have 2 more questions. I hope you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
These are the QM standards, correct?
Right.
How are they aligned to the regular state standards? Or do you align those together?
So the content standards are a part of the QM course standards. And I lost my cheat sheet. It's over there. Hang on. So the standards in the rubric, they're called the competencies. So they're in section 2. If I go back to my little, so the little standards, they have substandards. So 2.3 is a part of QM standard 2. And so the content standards are a part of the QM standards, so they would be taken care of as well. Because aligning a course with your state standards is a requirement for meeting the QM standards, but then QM has other categories of standards. Does that answer your question?
It does. I just wonder about if states vary on their standards.
They do.
Yeah.
And content areas are, I teach English. That one's usually
Almost.
fairly, we
Yeah.
have the Common Core for English and math. But then you get into other subject areas and it can vary quite a bit.
Perfect. Okay. And then one more, do y'all ever meet in person?
As a staff or with our students?
Well, like, no, you and your teachers that you're
Yeah.
giving all this feedback to. Do y'all ever meet in person?
We do. Sarah, do you want to tackle that one?
Sure. So a number of us live in the Gull Lake School District and meet regularly. We have a classroom that we kind of are utilizing. Betsy lives a little bit farther away from us, so we see her a few times a year. But yes, there are a number of us that meet regularly and support one another.
Awesome. Thank you. That's it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I kept my questions all the way through. So thanks.
Oh, well, thank you. Those are great questions.
I have a question.
Mhm.
If you're getting started with this, I'm familiar with QM from the higher end standpoint, but
Mhm.
we're rolling it brand new into our K-12 school this year.
Mhm.
And I find that my teachers are so overwhelmed by the thought of it. We haven't even shown them the rubric and they're so overwhelmed. Where would you recommend to start? Because I know there's certain things we can standardize, certain standards we can do across the board and kind of do for them, like General Standard 7 or General Standard 6. But what about how would you roll it out? Like, what would you get them started on? Would you get them started on 2 and give them a lot of time to do it, or would you start them on a different standard?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that I found you're absolutely right. It was way overwhelming. And I kind of jumped in with both feet into the deep end and doggy paddled a lot. I never drowned, but it was dicey. So that was, don't do it that way. Don't start with everything. I was just so excited and, seemed like the way to go. You're absolutely right. If you look at the template standards, often as an organization, your designers or whoever does your tech stuff could create kind of course shells that cover all of that. And then you would give teachers that skeleton and tell them, just don't touch these things. These links at the bottom where they say like where to get tech help or academic help, like those just need to stay there. Don't take them out. The other thing to consider is to revisit or consider any kind of ongoing improvement plans you have and see if there's, and attach those to a standard. So what are your goals as an organization? And then is there a standard, maybe at most 2 or 3 that would support that goal? Our district has a goal of read, write, speak with purpose. So when I look at this, and Sara alluded to it, that using a variety of assessments that let students practice that goal can be rolled into standard 3 with assessment types, that we're not just doing a bunch of multiple choice quizzes, but that we're giving them chances to read, write, speak with purpose. And then we attach that to the QM rubric and just kind of task teachers with those things. So then it's not another thing, you have to do all of our district goals and our school goals. And now you have these, another thing. This is really just how can it align to the work you're already doing? Does that help?
Yeah, no, that does help, but so then would you say like starting with like a 3 or a 4? Because that's kind of like in terms of the general standards. I'm just like, it's day one, we need a starting point.
Mhm.
What is where's the best place to start in terms of, I know that you guys recommend one at a time, but which one? Because I think
Right.
some of them are more open
Um,
than others.
if you want to start with something easy, and it is always great to really ensure success right out of the gate. So don't give them like aligning all of your objectives top to bottom as their first goal, because that's really big and scary. And then if they don't do well, then they're like, well, we just don't want to do that QM rubric stuff ever again. And just you want to start with a low bar, ensure everybody's going to meet it, and then kind of build on that. So I would say standard 1 is actually a pretty good place to start. And we found some shortcomings there with just a course landing page and the teacher having all of the information in it that they were supposed to have there. And that would be like 1.7. So that was one thing that we went through like everyone's course, and that's pretty ground level kind of stuff, but we still found some things to iron out there. The other recommendation I would have is, if I was considering this, if I consider the folks I work with, and this might not apply to everyone, is that every instructor I'm supporting isn't at the same place. So you might give general standards to maybe a group or a department, and if possible, if you have the bandwidth to manage it, let them decide what standard is going to have the biggest impact for them. A 6 through 12 or a 9 through 12, the assessment and alignment things might be really big. For an elementary class, something like learner support and accessibility might be a bigger need. So I would maybe just figure out how you could fine tune it that way.
Thank you.
Mhm. We'd also love to hear anyone else's ideas, or feel free to share or ask questions. I've got not quite a whole year under my belt, so I'm definitely not the expert in this.
So Betsy, if you don't mind, I was actually kind of curious, somewhat related to Krista's question, not necessarily like what would you recommend first, but I'm interested in is there a specific general standard that you find your teachers have a little bit more of a challenge with than others, and which is that, and why is that?
Yeah, great question. I'm trying to find it on my little cheat sheet here. Assessment is one that, like Sara alluded to, that's a teacher has to be ready for that. And I communicate that that's okay. A teacher in their first year of maybe doing content creation, they're not an instructional designer. They're also doing, wearing a lot of other hats in our organization anyway. They're doing, placement testing, and they're doing, grading, and, we're doing kind of all of this as we're moving along. Or they're doing it in the summer as a part-time thing. That in your first year, you're not going to be there, but just once you get to that point where you have a standard assessment in everywhere, then how do you take it to the next level? So I would say in assessment, that's kind of a secondary feedback I often give, is that there's nothing wrong now that there's not a problem. I mean, that's a good place to be. You don't have any problems. Everything is there where it should be. And this is where you could take it kind of to the next level. Accessibility is always a tough one. It gets left out a lot. If you feel like your students aren't using it, why should I bother? Why should I bother with captions if I haven't been told I have a student that has a need in that particular area? and just kind of selling the fact that it's still worth doing, that UDL, universal accessibility, is helpful for all students. And then if you get to the point where we need it, you'll be so happy that you did. So that's probably an area that falls off the radar the first, or the beginning.
Very similar. I'm more experienced in the higher ed context, but it's very close, especially when it comes to accessibility. It's difficult to kind of advocate for what is a big lift, but I agree. I think really, and not so much once you have a student who may have those needs, but I think once you kind of get to experience those yourself, even small things like captions can make a really big difference.
And I would say that maybe that's an easier sell on elementary teachers, because they do have such a need for differentiation, that they're usually helping me convince everyone else that, like it was an elementary teacher that brought the captioning, the Moat tool to me and said, how can we make this accessible to our teachers? Because I've been using it and it's been really helpful. I would say I'm trying to think of anything else I didn't cover. It was interesting. I took the reviewer course to help our staff, but obviously that also made me eligible to be a reviewer, and I've reviewed 2 courses for QM, and it was really helpful for me to have gone through this so many times. I didn't feel nearly as lost doing my first couple of reviews over the summer. So it was good practice. And I have plans to get our teachers into each other's classes more this year during some of our PD time, because it's proved so helpful for them to just see another idea. Just even, as far as Krista's question about where to start, we did the PD where everybody logs into they log into their course as a student, and then they share their laptop with a colleague, and then they just navigate through. What does this look like for a student? They could ask each other questions. And my vision was this would help us to troubleshoot, maybe things that were unclear, but it actually had the effect of, oh, wow, this is really neat. How did you do this with slides? How did you do this with this accessibility feature? And so they shared a lot of things that they just didn't know each other was doing, because in our LMS, they don't have a way to walk through someone else's class in that way. So I'll definitely be trying to facilitate more of those interactions this year. We did a surfing theme, surfing through the curriculum. It was really fun. Flower necklaces from the Dollar Tree and everything.
Betsy, I have another question. This is Kevin. What LMS system do you use? I don't think you mentioned the name.
We use Agilix Buzz, which we find to be more designed for little learners. It was one of the selling points on it. We have our own account with Agilix and our own website. Vendors that we purchase curriculum from, we import into our LMS. We don't go out and use the vendor LMS. So we pick vendors that also are compatible. It's not really one of the big mainstream ones like Blackboard or Canvas. So, there are fewer integrations, but there were enough that it's been working for us. We've been in it for 4 years now. Before that, we used Moodle, which is super flexible if you have pretty much a person dedicated to running it, because it doesn't come with support natively unless you contract that out through another company. When I had to make the case to pay for Agilix when we'd been getting Moodle for free, I made the case that we either have to pay Agilix or we have to hire a person that's going to run Moodle, because it's grown to the point where nobody had the time. So
Great, thank you.
we've enjoyed it so far.
Well, thank you all so much, Betsy and Sarah. I hope everyone really enjoyed the presentation and got some good ideas out of that. We have another session coming up at 2:11. So we have a brief break now. So we hope to see you in the next session.
Thank you.